Hey, Muggsy. Happy Easter. Yes, I meant it when I said I am learning very good photography skills from you. That's why I was able to remember to tell Matthew to take his sunglasses off. But the blinking, yeah, well, Josh does that too. Back to reading. We are reading Max Lucado's book, Everyone Needs a Miracle. He Still Moves Stones. And we're reading chapter 17, Seeing the Unseen. When you are afraid of the future. He starts with a verse from Mark 5, verse 21 through 24, and Mark 5, verse 35 through 43. But this is a little different. He has another verse from another book that he wants us to concentrate on, which is Hebrews 11, verse 1. So let's start reading with those verses first. When Jesus went in the boat back to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him there. A leader of the synagogue, named Jairus, came there, saw Jesus, and fell at his feet. He begged Jesus, saying again and again, "My daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her, so she will be healed and will live." So Jesus went with him. He was the leader of the synagogue. While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of the synagogue leader, and they said, "Your daughter is dead. There is no need to bother the teacher anymore." But Jesus paid no attention to what they said. He told the synagogue leader, "Don't be afraid, just believe." Jesus let only Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, go with him. When they came to the house of the synagogue leader, Jesus found many people there making lots of noise and crying loudly. Jesus entered the house and said to them, "Why are you crying and making so much noise? This child is not dead, only asleep." But they laughed at him. So after throwing them out of the house, Jesus took the child's father and mother and his 3 followers into the room where the child was. Taking hold of the girl's hand, he said to her, "Talitha koum." This means, "Young girl, I tell you to stand up." At once the girl stood right up and began walking. She was 12 years old. Everyone was completely amazed. Jesus gave them strict orders not to tell people about this. Then he told them to give the girl something to eat. He always does that right after resurrections. He wants you to eat. Even himself, he sat down and ate. And part of it was, I think, to show Thomas, who was doubting, and we'll be hearing those Bible verses soon in church, that he definitely was alive again, because look, he's eating again. Alive people eat. So the scripture he wants us to think about while we are reading chapter 17 is Hebrews 11, verse 1. Faith means knowing that something is real, even if we do not see it. I was thinking, because there's that verse. Even though our senses fail, we'll believe. Oh, how does that go? It's a famous Easter song. Oh, I wish I could remember it. Man, it's just like on the tip of my tongue, tip of my memory. Anybody read it in there? Oh, what our senses fail. Anyhow, let's get back to the chapter. Last night, I tried to teach my daughters to see with their eyes closed. I only see islands. When you get older, you sometimes get to see floaters. I asked Jenna, the 8-year-old, to go to one side of the den. I had Andrea's obligatory yawn. The 6-year-old stand on the other. 3-year-old Sarah and I sat on the couch in the middle and watched. Jenna's job was to close her eyes and walk. Andrea's job was to be Jenna's eyes and talk her safely across the room. Talk her safely across the room. With like take 2 baby steps to the left and take 4 giant steps straight ahead. Andrea successfully navigated her sister through a treacherous maze of chairs, a vacuum cleaner, and a laundry basket. Sounds horrid. Then Jenna took her turn. She guided Andrea past her mom's favorite lamp and shouted just in time to keep her from colliding into the wall when she thought her right foot was her left foot. After several treks through the darkness, they stopped and we processed. I didn't like it, Jenna complained. It's scary going where you can't see. I was afraid I was going to fall, Andrea agreed. I kept taking little steps to be safe. I can relate, can't you? We grown-ups don't like the dark either, but we walk in it. We, like Jenna, often complain about how scary it is to walk where we can't see, and we, like Andrea, often take timid steps so we won't fall. I think sometimes when we do the scary walk up north, which is pitch dark, no flashlights allowed, walk the entire nature trail, which is a mile long, and we all have to hold on to each other, a whole group. Sometimes there's like 30 of us. I imagine the animals think we're crazy. But we do make it, and it's amazing what you start to feel. You start to feel the hardness of being on a hard packed trail that many people have walked on versus the soft, loamy soil of the unwalked on ground. And you will notice that there are fewer leaves on the real trail, and there's lots of leaves on the forest floor when you wander off the trail. So you start to use more of your other senses. So what senses are we going to use now? We have to use spiritual senses to relate to Jesus since he's no longer with us physically. We've reason to be cautious. We are blind. We can't see the future. We have absolutely no vision beyond the present. I can't tell you with certainty that I will live long enough to finish this paragraph. Phew, I did. Nor can you tell me you'll live long enough to read the next one. Hope you do. I'm not talking nearsightedness or obstructed view. I'm talking opaque blindness. I'm not talking about a condition that passes with childhood. I'm describing a condition that passes only with death. We are blind to the future. It's one limitation we all share. The wealthy are just as blind as the poor. The educated are just as sightless as the unschooled, and the famous know as little about the future as the unknown. None of us know how our children will turn out. None of us know the day we will die. No one knows whom he or she will marry, or even if marriage lies before him or her. We are universally, absolutely, unalterably blind. We are all Jenna with her eyes shut, groping through a dark room, listening for a familiar voice, but with one difference. Her surroundings are familiar and friendly. Ours can be hostile and fatal. Her worst fear is a stubbed toe. Our worst fear is more threatening: cancer, divorce, loneliness, death, and even worse than regular death, death of someone who you don't know. Did they know Jesus? Did they even want to know Jesus? Did they embrace Jesus? The uncertain death. And try as we might to walk as straight as we can, chances are our toe is going to get stubbed and we are going to get hurt. Just ask Jairus. He is a man who has tried to walk as straight as he can. But Jairus was a man whose path has taken a sudden turn into a cave, a dark cave, and he doesn't want to enter it alone. Jairus is the leader of the synagogue. That may not mean much to you and me, but in the days of Christ, the leader of the synagogue was the most important man in the community. I wonder who determined that. But what a lot of responsibility when that is determined of you. The synagogue was the center of religion, education, leadership, and social activity. The leader of the synagogue was the senior religious leader, so he was the senior religious leader, the highest ranking professor, so he was an educated person, the mayor, and the best known citizen all in one. Wow. Not too much to qualify. Jairus has it all: job security, a guaranteed welcome at the coffee shop. That's right. A pension plan, golf every Thursday, and an annual all-expense-paid trip to the national convention. Who could ask for more? Yet Jairus does. He has asked for more. In fact, he would trade the whole package of perks and privileges for just one assurance: that his daughter will live. The Jairus we see in this story is not the clear-sighted, black-frocked, nicely groomed civic leader. He is instead a blind man begging for a gift. He fell at Jesus' feet, saying again and again, "My daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so she will be healed and will live." So he already had faith in Jesus. He traveled to Jesus. He went to get Jesus. He doesn't barter with Jesus. You do me a favor and I'll see you are taken care of for life. He doesn't negotiate with Jesus. The guys in Jerusalem are getting pretty testy about your antics. Tell you what, you handle this problem of mine. I'll make a few calls. He doesn't make excuses. Normally, I'm not this desperate, Jesus, but I've got a small problem. He just pleads. There are times in life when everything you have to offer is nothing compared to what you are asking to receive. Jairus is at such a point. What could a man offer in exchange for his child's life? So there are no games, no haggling, no masquerades. The situation is starkly simple. Jairus is blind to the future, and Jesus knows the future. So Jairus asks for his help. And Jesus, who loves the honest heart, goes to give it. And God, who knows what it is like to lose a child, empowers his son. Oh boy. But before Jairus and Jesus get very far, they are interrupted by emissaries from his house. "Your daughter is dead. There's no need to bother the teacher anymore." How polite of them. Get ready, hang on to your hat. Here's where the story gets moving. Jesus goes from being led to leading, from being convinced by Jairus to convincing Jairus, from being admired to being laughed at, from helping out the people to casting out the people, the distractions, the disbelievers. Here's where Jesus takes control. But Jesus paid no attention to what they said. I love that line. Verse 36, it describes the critical principle for seeking the unseen. Ignore what people say, block them out, turn them off, close your ears, and if you have to, walk away. Remember when he told the disciples that he sent out to teach, and if you go into a place that won't accept your words, he told them to take their shoes off and clank them together and knock the dust off the bottom of their shoes and walk away and not even carry a dust particle of that place with them so that it may not influence them. Faith sometimes begins by stuffing your ears with cotton. Jesus turns immediately to Jairus and pleads, "Don't be afraid, just believe." Jesus compels Jairus to see the unseen. When Jesus says, "Just believe," he is imploring, don't limit your possibilities to the visible. Don't listen only for the audible. Don't be controlled by the logical. Believe there is more to life than meets the eye. Trust me. Jesus is pleading. Don't be afraid. Just trust. A father in the Bahamas cried out the same plea to his young son who was trapped in a burning house. The two-story structure was engulfed in flames, and the family, the father, the mother, and several children, was on its way out when the smallest boy became terrified and ran back upstairs. His father outside shouted to him, "Jump, jump, son, jump, I'll catch you," the boy cried. "But, Daddy, I can't see you." "I know," said his father, "but I can see you." The father could see, even though the son could not. A simple example of faith was found on the wall of a concentration camp. On it, a prisoner had carved the words, "I believe in the sun, even though it doesn't shine." Not in the concentration camp. "I believe in love, even when it is not shown." "I believe in God, even when he doesn't speak." I try to imagine the person who etched those words. I try to envision his skeletal hand gripping the broken glass or stone that cut into the wall. I try to imagine his eyes squinting through the darkness as he carved each letter. What hand could have cut such a conviction? What eyes could have seen such good in such horror? There's only one answer: eyes that chose to see the unseen. As Paul wrote, we set our eyes not on what we see, but on what we cannot see. What we see will last only a short time, but what we cannot see will last forever. Jesus is asking Jairus to see the unseen, to make a choice, either to live by the facts or to see faith, to see by faith. When tragedy strikes, we too are left to choose what we see. We can see either the hurt or the healer. The choice is ours. Jairus made his choice. He opted for faith in Jesus, and faith in Jesus led him to his daughter. At the house, Jesus and Jairus encounter a group of mourners. Jesus is troubled by their wailing. That's kind of distracting. It bothers him that they express such anxiety over death. "Why are you crying and making so much noise? The child is not dead, only asleep." That's not a rhetorical question, it's an honest one. From his perspective, the girl is not dead. She is only asleep. From God's viewpoint, death is not permanent. It is a necessary step for passing from this world to the next. It's not an end, it's a beginning. As a young boy, I had two great loves: playing and eating. Summers were made for afternoons on the baseball diamond. Oh, second yawn. Summers were made for afternoons on the baseball diamond and meals at Mom's dinner table. Mom had a rule, however: dirty, sweaty boys could never eat at the table. Her first words to us as we came home were always, "Go clean up, take off those clothes if you want to eat." Dirty boys. Now, no boy is fond of bathing and dressing, but I never once complained and defied my mom by saying, "I'd rather stink than eat." In my economy, a bath and clean shirt were a small price to pay for a good meal. And from God's perspective, death is a small price to pay for the privilege of sitting at his table. Flesh and blood cannot have a part in the kingdom of God. This body that can be destroyed must clothe itself with something that can never be destroyed. And this body that dies must clothe itself with something that can never die. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 50, 53 emphasis added. God is even more insistent than my mom was. In order to sit at his table, a change of clothing must occur, and we must die in order for our body to be exchanged for a new one. So from God's viewpoint, death is not to be dreaded, it is to be welcomed. And when he sees people crying and mourning over death, he wants to know, why are you crying? When we see death, we see disaster. When Jesus sees death, he sees deliverance. But he knows what we don't know. He knows what we don't know. We want to believe, we believe it's there, but none of us has actually ever touched heaven, looked at it, listened to it, felt it. We have no memory of it. That's why we cry. And plus we know, our physical bodies are going to be separated from the physical presence of somebody we loved a lot. And we don't know when we're all going to be reunited again. Maybe a real long time. Look at some of the saints that died. My goodness, thousands of years ago. When we see death, we see disaster. When Jesus sees death, he sees deliverance. That's too much for the people to take. They laughed at him. Next time people mock you, you might remember they mocked him too. Now look closely, because you aren't going to believe what Jesus does next. He throws the mourners out. And that's what the text says. After throwing them out of the house, verse 40, he doesn't just ask them to leave, he throws them out. He picks them up by collar and belt and sets them sailing. Jesus' response was decisive and strong in the original text. The word used here is the same word used to describe what Jesus did to the money changers in the temple. It's the same verb used 38 times to describe what Jesus did to the demons. Why? Why such force? Why such intolerance? Throws them out. Throughout the money changers, throughout the demons, throughout the people. Perhaps the answer is found by going back to the last evening's living room experience. After Jenna and Andrea had taken turns guiding each other through the den, I decided to add a diabolical twist. On the last trip, I snuck up behind Jenna, who was walking with her eyes shut, and began whispering, "Don't listen to her. Listen to me. I'll take care of you." Jenna stopped. She analyzed the situation and made her choice between the two voices. "Be quiet, Daddy," she giggled, and then continued in Andrea's direction. Undeterred, I grabbed the lid of a pan, held it next to her ear, and banged it with a spoon. She jumped and stopped, startled by the noise. Andrea, seeing that her pilgrim was frightened, did a great thing. She ran across the room, threw her arms around her sister, and said, "Don't worry, I'm right here." She wasn't about to let the noise distract Jenna from the journey, and God isn't going to let the noise distract you from yours. He's still busy casting out the critics and silencing the voices that could deter you. Some of his work you have seen, most of it you haven't. Only when you get home will you know how many times he has protected you from luring voices. Only eternity will reveal the time he interfered with the transfer, protecting you from involvement in unethical business, fogged in the airport, distancing you from a shady opportunity, flattened your tire, preventing you from checking into the hotel and meeting a seductive man. And only heaven will show you the times he protected you by giving you a mate who loves God more than you do. Opening the door for a new business so you could attend the same church. Having the right voice with the right message on the right radio station the day you needed to hear his encouragement. Stopping you at a stoplight to prevent you from getting into an accident. Mark it down. God knows you and I are blind. He knows living by faith and not by sight doesn't come naturally. And I think that's one reason he raised Jairus' daughter from the dead. Not for her sake, she was better off in heaven, but for our sake, to teach us that heaven sees when we trust. Our final thought from the seeing with your eyes closed experiment. I asked Jenna how she could hear Andrea's voice guiding her across the room when I was trying to distract her by whispering in her ear. Her answer, I just concentrated and listened as hard as I could. You know, that you almost can tell, well, when you're finally a 63-year-old woman who had plenty of encounters with demons and Satans and distractions, that you go, wait a second. I know what's going on. I know what's going on. And knowing makes it easier to concentrate on Jesus. I'll say to the devil, I'll say, okay, this is gonna go. Is this how it's gonna go? Is this how it's gonna go, buddy? Huh? Yeah, really? Oh, you picked the wrong day to pick on me, because I'm going to start saying the one word you can't stand to hear, and you're going to leave, or you're going to get down on your knees. And all I do is start saying, Jesus, 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 Jesus. Believe me, everything gets better. There is power in the name of Jesus. Every time, every time, every time, things get better. Whenever I have used that, every time, things get better. It's like, I understand what's going on now. I got your ticket, devil. I'm fighting back with fire, and I reach for my biggest gun in my arsenal. Jesus, 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 Jesus. Next chapter is chapter 18, Joseph's prayer. When you're confused by God's actions, only always. Yeah. My ways are not your ways, he says to us. Go figure. His ways aren't our ways. Our ways aren't his ways. But we're trainable. Well, Muggsy, glad to be back reading again. We have a busy week. I have to work again on Thursday. I finally got some things straightened out at work, so I'll have to get a bunch of education modules done, and I mean a bunch, but oh well, it's money in the bank. That pays the bills. All right, God bless. Love ya. Good night. Ending the stream.